You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode of the podcast, I speak with Ryan Lange. He's a 20-year-old ultrarunner who recently completed the Moab 240. We talk about how he got into running and how running 240 miles went for him. I hope you enjoy. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
Adam, what's going on, dude? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so why don't we just start off with learning a little bit about your athletic background. So you're currently in college. Did you run in high school, or are you running in college, or how did you get into the running scene?
Yeah, so in high school, I was a football player. You know, I wasn't huge into running. We did a lot of speed training, which I'm not the fastest, but I didn't get into running until about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, when I did a few light runs. I wanted to lose some weight, and I would start running 2 to 3 miles here and there. And eventually, about 6 to 8 months later, I started to actually lose some weight because I was running about 5 to 6 miles at times, and I was feeling really good about losing weight. And then I started to go, even further. I'm like, okay, I could, screw it, I could try a marathon. So I went and did the Philly Marathon, which was last November.
Yep.
That was my first big race. And it was, I had no idea what I was doing. I was cramping up the last 3 miles. My hammies were seizing up. I had no idea what to be doing with nutrition. I had no idea what my body needed. I just kind of threw myself out there and was, it didn't end well. But I liked the feeling at the finish line, even though I wasn't physically feeling great. It was a feeling of accomplishment. And right there at the end of the finish, at the end of the race, that's where I got addicted to the feeling of accomplishment and working hard, and then that coming into, satisfaction. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try 50K in the trails.
Yeah.
So later that January, my dad and I, we went up to North Jersey, Watchung, New Jersey, and it was a very low-key race. There was only, I think, 16 people that did the 50K.
Yeah.
But I had no idea what it was like running in trails. I didn't really think it'd be any different, but I get there and it was about 3,000 feet of elevation, which is a pretty good amount.
Oh yeah.
And my back and everything was smoked by mile 20. It was again, I had no idea really what I was doing. But my dad was there pitting me. It was a 6 mile loop, about 6 mile loop. And it actually started snowing like crazy. It actually made it more fun. And he enjoyed pitting me, and it was kind of like, he compared it to NASCAR scene. I come in all wrangled up, and he's going to help me out, reload everything, give me a little pep talk, and get me going. So that's, where we kind of learned it was a little bit of a team effort.
Yeah. And
then I was like, I was searching around. I was like, that was kind of fun. I felt crappy, but in the end, I felt good. So I was searching for something longer, and I found Badwater Cape Fear, which is an awesome race. Chris Cosin, the race director, is a great guy. He really knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And, it was flat, no elevation. So I'm like, this is totally doable. So I ramped up my training a little bit. And that was in March, so about 2 months later. And we went there, and I kind of underestimated running in sand. So then again, and I did not eat anything the entire 50 miles.
Oh, wow.
I still did not know what I was totally doing. I was just kind of throwing myself out there. And me and my dad got to the Outback. We went to Outback after, and I was passing out at the table because I had absolutely no energy in me. So at this point, my dad was like, all right, you need to figure out, how your body works.
Yeah.
So I was, I was researching, and I found this camp in Colorado by CTS Train Right. And that's where I went, flew out because I love this. I love doing this. This is really awesome. I feel good after these big races, but I need to learn how to do it. I was just kind of reading articles, and I read a book, but I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I went out to this camp. It was an ultra running camp ran by Jason Coop. He also wrote a book, Training Essentials for Ultra Running, which was awesome.
Yeah. He's a big time coach. Yep.
Yeah. He's awesome. And went out there, and they taught me everything, eating wise, because I would run right out of the gates and feel great and be running really fast, learning how to pace myself better. and that was in May, so that was Memorial Day weekend. And I was feeling great leaving that place. There's a lot of people that were really confident because I came in knowing nothing, and by the third day they were like, wow, like Ryan's doing really well. So I learned a lot about my body there, and I learned how to continue to learn about my body because it's still stuff that I don't know. But I learned a lot more about nutrition, and then I went into my 100-miler in July, and it was flat, and it was on a lot of road, which was I was not anticipating that.
Yeah.
And being on the East Coast, I'm sure you know, it's a lot more humid than the West Coast.
Yeah. And
I'm pretty sure it was the fact that I wasn't taking nearly enough salt. So my calves cramped up around mile 60. My stomach was gone maybe 5-10 miles later. I couldn't eat anything. I was pretty much walking by mile 70, 75 and not eating anything and feeling awful. So my dad walked me in the last mile at the 100-miler, and he could tell I was a hurting pup. And 2 weeks later, when I told him I wanted to was thinking about the Moab, he's like, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. You need to. He put a reference to my dad used to have a dog back when I was younger, and he would play with the red dot with the dog, and the dog would be running around, and the dog actually tore its pads off of its feet.
Yeah.
And he's like, because I'm not the person that's going to quit, even if I'm really not doing well.
Yeah.
And he was like, if that's the case, I'm pulling you out of this race. And I was not going to let that happen. And I screwed up. I was not eating the right things at my 100-miler. I was eating a lot of bars with, I think it was the fake sugar stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's what shot my stomach. So I went to, basic stuff, oatmeal, potatoes. I started doing like a half a burger before a run to really, kind of train my stomach a little bit, but see what would affect me very well and not so well. So I really, really ramped up my training going into Moab. Started doing about 75-ish miles a week. I found that was my sweet spot to where I wouldn't be overtraining. And I started eating almost every run and testing different things. And mentally preparing myself, which was the biggest thing. Because if you think about 240 miles in one shot, it's like yourself out.
Yeah.
So training mentally, that was all from, late July until the race. That was kind of my biggest priority, was mentally getting myself prepared. I did a go ruck. It's like a military training throughout the night, 12 hours of it. So I didn't sleep and did all this training. And then right after, I went and ran 20 miles to get like that sleep deprived feeling and to become comfortable with that sleep deprived feeling. And it was not enjoyable. But that's what I felt like all you can do, because people ask, how did you mentally prepare yourself?
Yeah. And
the only answer I have is to get your brain familiar with the uncomfortable feeling of being very tired and in a lot of pain.
Right.
So I walked a 50K with 30 pounds on me to really get some foot pain and try to become comfortable with foot pain, because I wear a lot of flats out in Moab, and some of it was hard road, which was not good on the feet. Once you're in the trails and going up and down, not as much pain, I'm sure you know. But and even in my training, I would try to envision, when I'm running, thinking about the fact that, okay, I'm gonna have to become comfortable with feeling like this for 3 to 4 days.
Yeah.
And just come to peace with yourself inside your head and realize and be okay with the fact that you're gonna feel like this. But in the end, it's gonna be an awesome accomplishment if you could get there.
Right.
And having trust in your training, I wanted to train very hard. So when I toed that start line, I felt good and felt okay. I wasn't like, I could have gone harder in my training, and that was huge as well. Being at the race and being comfortable knowing that I front loaded all the effort to be able to go out and have a good race.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I notice here is, there's a common sort of theme with ultra runners, which is there's this slippery slope, but it seems like you've gone on the slipperiest of slopes, which is you go from a marathon to a 240-mile race within a course of, I guess, a little bit over a year or something. It's quite a progression. So it's quite interesting. But I want to take a step back, and I just want to learn a little bit about this camp you went to. So, I mean, what were some of the key things? I mean, obviously, you talked a little bit about nutrition and how you learned about that, but what else did you learn in the camp? And second piece is, how did you deal with the altitude? You're coming from the East Coast, and then you're going to this camp in the altitude. Did that kind of make things more difficult for you?
I had emailed Coop saying that. I was like, hey, I'm coming from sea level, up to you guys. Is that going to be an issue? How can I prepare for that? And he said, you really can't just hydrate a lot. And I got there, and I went all the way. Top of Mount Rosa was 11,800. I don't know. It was pretty high. And no, I was fine. I guess it was just maybe luck. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if I'm the kind of person to get altitude sickness all the time. I don't know if it happens to others more frequently, but the camp was awesome. And the camp is where I learned that I'm not alone. There's a lot of other people that enjoy doing this kind of epic sport.
Yeah.
And good people, really good people. I met a lot of friends out there. One of them actually ended up doing the Moab too. So it was good camaraderie. And I learned a lot. I learned how to use trekking poles as well. And those were huge, huge help at Moab, or any race, because it saves your back. Even if it takes off, barely helps you. Over 100 to 200, however long you're running, it's going to help you in the end. So I learned a lot technically about, I would just bomb down a hill and not think about my quads being smoked by the end. And they taught me how to be conservative and be very soft on your feet going down the hills. And a lot of technical stuff like that. And that kind of gave me the confidence being out there and being in the altitude, because Moab only went up to, I think, right under 11,000. So I knew I've been to 12,000. I've been fine. Felt fine. Didn't get any altitude sickness. So that, again, gave me more confidence going into the race. But now I've made some friendships that are going to continue for the rest of my life out there. And it's totally awesome. And that kind of spawned me to be very confident and continue with this sport.
Right. And then going into Moab, did you have a coach or a plan that you purchased, or were you just going based on, hey, I learned this in the camp and I learned this from my other races and this is what I'm going to do? I mean, did you have any assistance with kind of plotting it out?
Yeah, no, I was all on my own. I'm a college student, so I don't have all the cash in the world to pay for a coach and stuff like that, especially paying for these races. So no, I kind of, because the plan is very personal. Everyone's going to be different. Someone's sweet spot might be 100 miles. Someone's sweet spot might be 60 miles a week. So I just kind of felt it out and figured out my body and what it could take, and how I could push it to the most extent and gain the most without getting to that point of diminishing returns. But no, I did not have any coach. I spoke to Coach Coop here and there, maybe asked him a few questions.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have a coach. I had a pacer at Moab, and I spoke to him about 2 months prior to the race, just chit chat about quick tips for training. But no, I didn't have a coach. I didn't. A lot of people thought that was kind of risky going into a race like that, because obviously the coaches know a lot better than me.
Yeah.
But no, I just felt like I didn't need a coach.
Right. So you're, and I don't know if we mentioned this, but you're a college student, you're 20 years old. I mean, so, you're definitely in the rare end of, kind of where people from an age perspective do these sorts of races. And then I'm assuming based on all of your colleagues at school, there are not many people doing this as well. So you're kind of unique in that aspect. So I guess from both directions, I mean, from your friends in school who see you running 70 miles a week, I mean, what are they saying or thinking? And then also when you show up to these races, you're usually or most definitely the youngest person there. I mean, how does that feel?
I kind of like it. It makes me feel comfortable knowing that, I don't know, there's a lot of older people with a lot more knowledge around me, and I can always continue learning. But now everyone at school is always like, dude, you're nuts. Live life, have fun, be a college student. And I'm like, I'm just not the kind of person to kind of sit around and do nothing. If I have a spare 2 hours, I might as well go run.
Yeah.
And that was my ideal ever since after the marathon. But now, it's definitely different. And it kind of proves that age is honestly just a number, in my opinion. If there's 60, 70-year-olds doing these races, it doesn't matter how old you are. Maybe when you're younger, I hear that you might be a little faster, but your endurance isn't as good as maybe a 50-year-old.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I kind of enjoy being a young gun. It's nice. I guess it's my niche. But No, it's fun, and it kind of shows that anyone could come and do this. You don't have to be anything special. You could come, and if you put in the hard work, you could be good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons here. I mean, first of all, from an age perspective, like you said, I mean, endurance takes many years to build up. So yes, you have the advantage of being young and probably can bounce back quickly with resilience and that kind of thing. But the endurance part is, you don't have as much experience as some of these older people. So everyone's got something going for them, and everyone's got an obstacle in some way. And, like you said, I mean, you don't need to be some special track star or, I don't know, a marathon Olympic qualifier to be successful in these races. And you're proving that. So it's really, really an amazing story. So let's dig into the Moab 240. How did you choose this race? So I guess after the 100-miler, you wanted to go bigger. And so, it's not just a 200-mile race you chose the longest. So, almost 240 miles. When I first saw this race come out and, Candace, the race director, announced it, and I saw there was an extra, I guess, 39 miles or whatever to the 200-mile distance, I absolutely thought it was insane. And I was very intrigued as well. So how did you pick it?
So Candace originally had a Bigfoot 120 set up for in October. And I was always ironing up. This was before I even did the 50-miler. And I was like, that's like going to be the race of a lifetime. Like, this is going to be the thing that I do.
Yeah.
And she canceled it. I get to the website and she canceled it. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And it's like, click here for our new race. And I click it and it's Moab 240. I'm like, well, I guess that's what I'm doing.
I like it
because it worked out for my training plan. It's about almost 3 months after my 100-miler. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? Whatever. If there's people that are doing this race and there's people that are able to do this, and in your head it's crazy. Like, you're like, oh my God, like 240 miles, you can't do that. Like, that is nuts. And I asked my mom, I asked my dad, I asked Grandpa, I was like, I can't think of this day passing without me towing that start line. And, everyone was like, what's the worst that could happen? You go there, you make it 100 miles and you can't go on. Like, big whoop, you learned the lesson.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? All right, let's do it. My dad was all on board. My dad was my crew, my only crew, but he was awesome. And it's just kind of was just, I guess, fate, because Candace, canceled the Bigfoot 120 and made the Triple Crown of 200s with the Moab.
Yeah. So describe the course for me a little bit. I've seen pictures, I watched a few videos, but this is a new one, and I obviously know kind of what Moab's about. But on a 240-mile loop, you're probably seeing a pretty diverse set of terrain and stuff. I mean, how was it? I mean, you mentioned there's some roads, there's some trails, there's some mountains. Just kind of describe a little bit about what you saw and kind of how the course was.
Oh, it was beautiful. The first 15 miles, it was all of these awesome. We were running down the Colorado River for a little bit. And then we went into the mountains, and there's some beautiful, just absolute, and I'm from the East Coast, so there's none of this beautiful mountainous terrain out here. So it went by super fast because I'm just staring at everything. It's so beautiful. And in the beginning, there's a lot of people around, so you're chatting a lot too. And it was absolutely beautiful scenery. And if you think about 240 miles, the elevation gain was only 30,000 feet of ascent and then descent, obviously. So it really wasn't a lot of going up and down compared to like the Bigfoot, which is 50,000 in 205, I think.
Right.
And that's another thing that made me choose this race is I know like I have a mountain 2 hours away, so I should drive to that, but I can only do that like I have to spend a Saturday to do that, so I couldn't do that too much. So that was another thing. It was very nice not having a lot of up and downs because my quads weren't exactly fit for that yet, but. Now, going up into La Salle's was totally awesome. It was so cool how you could be running in 60 degrees and 20 minutes later it could be 45 degrees. That was pretty cool being up in the La Salle Mountains.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. So it like running once you got into La Salle's, it felt like you were in a totally different state because you just went from desert, sandy at the bottom into this beautiful wooded area with aspen trees and stuff. And it was the hard part was going from the cold to the heat because it'd be a good 65, 70, and I'll be gone for 6 hours. I have to have a jacket on me for when the sun goes down. So that was definitely one of the battles that I screwed up the first night on, and the easy part of it was having all these beautiful views to look at, and that's what made the race just a tad easier. But yeah, man, it was something, even if you're not going out there to race. Me and my dad, after the race, we rented a little side-by-side and just drove around because it's so beautiful. Such a rocky, very rocky, a lot of slick rock, which I liked. It was a little tougher on the knees at times, but I liked that a lot better. And then, getting into the LaSalle Mountains, you had mountainous, good dirt that you're running on, single track. And there wasn't too many water crossings, obviously being in the desert, which was very beneficial because getting your feet wet was my biggest fear. I was changing my socks every aid station because it was also, after running 15 miles, my socks would be completely red because all the dirt got in it. Started to tear up my feet. So constantly changing your socks. And the medical director was great at taping up feet as well. He used this stuff called Luca tape, I believe. I need to get some of that because it was like second skin. So yeah, the terrain, it was doable, very technical at times, but at other times very easy.
Right. And, how did the race go for you overall? I mean, so it sounds like, obviously you finished, you had a good result. I mean, to me, the thing I would be most scared about with this race, and by the way, I'm very intrigued by it as well as the other 200-mile races, but what would scare me is you get to 100 miles and you're like, oh man, I've got 140 to go. Or you get to 140 miles, you're like, holy, I've got another 100 to go. I mean, how do you keep, I know you mentioned that mental strength and keeping it compartmentalized, but were there any times during the race where you got overwhelmed by the distance or any time you thought about quitting?
Yeah, that also going into the race, I told myself, don't ever think just next aid station. Just get to the next aid station. Don't ever think. I didn't even try to look how much longer I have to go because I knew that would possibly psych me out and kind of make me frustrated. Because there were definitely highs and lows. Most of the race was very well. I never had any nausea the entire race. I really, really felt good mentally. I was there, never got out of it. I hallucinated a little bit, but that was just a lack of sleep. The last 20 miles, I said to myself, I never felt the feeling of wanting to quit. And I think that contributes to, because I kept my feet in pretty good shape and my stomach was in good shape. So there's not really a lot of stress anywhere besides I had some chafing on my legs. But no, the race went really well. I was aiming to finish in around 95 to 100 hours. I finished in 86.
Wow.
And I kind of got to the finish line, and I felt like I felt too good at the finish line. Like I feel like I left a little bit out there, but I guess that's what's making me go and do something like this again. I had a great race. My dad's totally awesome crewing me, chasing me around in the truck. He slept almost less than I did.
Yeah.
Because he gets to an aid station, figures out, it gets all set up, figures out what I need or I'm going to need. I arrive, suits me up, feeds me, and now he's got to drive maybe back to the hotel to get a quick shower. And then by then it's going to be another 2-hour drive to the aid station. And it'll almost be like almost 5 hours. So I'm going to be getting to the next aid station soon. So he did a great job, and that's what contributed to me having an awesome race as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. It's such a cool thing to do with your dad too. And I'm really, it's cool to hear that you two found this kind of thing you can do together. And surely it's a good bonding experience. There's no doubt about that. I got to ask, as an East Coast guy, I'm an East Coaster as well, as you mentioned. I don't know how much wilderness experience you have, but how much of this race were you alone? And were there any times when you were like, man, I'm not in Philadelphia anymore. What the heck did I get myself into?
Yeah, definitely. I had a pacer for about 90 miles of it, and he came in the second day in the afternoon. But I was alone a lot, and I kind of, at times, I carried a knife with me for the first 40-ish miles because I don't know what's out there.
Yeah, I would do the same thing.
Yeah, but no, there wasn't anything harmful out there. Anything I don't think that was going to attack me. So I gave the knife back to my dad about 100-ish miles. But now it's an adventure. You could appreciate it a lot more because I'm going to school in the city and I'm always seeing concrete. So it was nice to be out there, but definitely a switch up and a little tough. But kind of tried to spin it in my head as something more enjoyable than something that I'm not used to. But it was definitely a little weird coming from South Jersey, Philly area to going out west.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in North Jersey and I live in New York City. And so one of the appeals of these races for me, and that, they're on my kind of bucket list. I'm like, man, it would be so cool to get out there in these remote areas and just be in the wilderness, because we just don't get enough of that here. I mean, I know I could if I drove somewhere else, but there's such an appeal. Like for me, my big wilderness is Central Park. And as you know, there's nothing in there that's scary other than other humans.
Exactly.
So what tips or lessons learned, would you give someone else? Someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to do the Moab 240. I mean, what would you tell them other than the things we've already discussed around good crew and not being focused on the big number of 240 miles, but anything else you would offer up and say, do this, don't do this?
No, it just comes down to the hard work. I stress to everyone, and even my friends from high school know I'm really nothing special. I have no serious skills. I just know how to put my head down and work, which is not a skill. It's not something you're born with. It's something you either train yourself or you're taught. And if there's anyone that comes to me and says, I want to do this, I would 100% tell them to then go out and do it, because it seriously comes down to just how hard you work. And if you have a passion and if you really want it, I woke up every day thinking about this race, then you're going to be able to finish. You're going to get there no matter what, because if you have the passion and the desire, there's no one stopping you. And I don't care what benefits you have, what downfalls you have, you are going to get there. So anyone that comes to me, your body, it'll make you a little easier, make the race a little easier. If you have a crew, it'll make the race a little easier. But if you really want it, you're going to get there.
Awesome. And then in terms of hard work, I mean, you mentioned, I think, 70 miles a week. I don't know if that was your peak or average, but I mean, what was the hard work that you put in? Just briefly describe, I mean, in terms of mileage, in terms of, I don't know, what cross training or hill training, anything like that. I'm just curious to hear a little bit about how you approached it.
Yeah, so I was in the spring and summer, like I mentioned with the co-op, I was working. So I go to work, I'd get there at 6:30 in the morning, and then I'd get done around 4:30. Come home, run 16 miles Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and go right to bed and wake up. And Tuesdays, I'd do a little bit of speed. And Thursdays and Sundays, I'd take off. And Saturdays, it's tough. I couldn't really go to the beach because I'd have to go get some mountain training in. And I'd drive 2 hours to a mountain, run for 6, and then drive 2 back. And then there goes my Saturday. So it's a big commitment. You seriously have to be willing to do it and willing to put in that kind of work and sacrifice, going and sitting on the beach and stuff like that.
Right. Exactly. So I guess we're almost out of time here. So, I mean, you mentioned before, I'm going to ask you, what's next on your radar? What's on your kind of like bucket list for the future? You mentioned already that, I want to do something like this again. I looked and saw you are signed up for Tahoe 200. So are you going to be doing Tahoe 218, and are you looking to do more of these in the future? Just kind of talk us through 18 and beyond.
Yeah. As soon as the time slot open for Tahoe, I signed up. I think it was Tuesday. Because I thought to myself, thinking about doing 240 miles was pretty crazy at the time. And thinking about maybe going to Tahoe and competing for a top spot seems pretty crazy right now. But if I put in even harder work, then what's stopping me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm fully signed up for the Tahoe next year. And I really want to do Badwater Salton Sea. It's a team race. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
California. Yeah. But I'm in the process of trying to find some teammates because I love the whole team part of it and sticking together for 81 miles. I really want to do that. And I'm trying to think about 100-miler to do in the summer. But it's tough with my work schedule. I don't know my work schedule, and I'm applying to jobs right now for my next co-op. So it's tough to plan. And plan accordingly for that. But Tahoe is on my list, and I'm already back in training and thinking about it every day.
Awesome. Well, if you land up coming to New York City in the summer, there is a 100-miler through the city. I don't know exactly when it is, but I know it's not going to give you the trail or hill experience you want, but goes throughout the entire city. So look into that one, because that may be an option that you can do it with your co-op.
Okay, yeah, it's awesome because I wouldn't have to travel too far. Thank you.
Exactly. All right, Ryan. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for sharing about your race. And you said, it's at 20 years old. Most people are, I don't know, playing video games and boozing all day in college. That's what I did, unfortunately. I got, the biggest skill I got out of college other than the education was I was a good foosball player. Now looking back, I'm like, I'm so envious of you. You're doing the things I want to do, and you're doing it much younger. So awesome. I mean, just really impressive, and best of luck, going into, 2018.
Thank you so much. Those kind words. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.